Shut up and sit down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Fight for Liberty show. Today, we have a guest, Mr. Sam Robb. He was one of the Libertarian presidential candidates in the 2020 election, maintained really, really solid, positive messaging throughout the entire campaign, stayed in the top chunk the whole way, and I really admired watching his campaign, and he's agreed to come on the show and talk to us about that campaign and his path into the Libertarian Party. So, Mr. Robb, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So I like to kind of start off most of the first-time appearances with just a basic overview of your political testimony, like what happened in your life that's caused you to believe the certain things that you believe. So not necessarily how you became a big L libertarian, but how you became a small L.
I gotcha. I'm going to blame a lot of science fiction authors, right? O'Neill Smith, Robert Heinlein, F. Paul Wilson, just a bunch of guys. That's what I like to read. That's what I grew up reading, and really, they have a lot of libertarian themes that run throughout all of their fiction. So I found myself for the longest time. Honestly, and I've admitted this before, thinking that libertarianism was a political philosophy and not necessarily a party, which was really kind of odd. So when I got to college, I went to Carnegie Mellon University on a Navy ROTC scholarship, and when you get to a liberal college and you're serving in the military, you quickly find out that there's one group of people politically that support you and endorse you, and there's another group that really doesn't like you very much. So I found myself leaning Republican, and I basically for a large part of my life considered myself to be a libertarian leaning Republican. Got to about 2012 and thought, seriously, Mitt Romney, that's the best you can do. The guy was so squishy, he might as well be a stress ball, right? I was not happy. I maintained my registration as a Republican through the primary just so I could vote against him, and then changed my registration over to Libertarian, and my voter's registration to Libertarian. So I was still a small L Libertarian at that point until. In all honesty, my wife left me unsupervised. I thought, hey, I'm filling out my daughter's FAFSA forms, and it's probably easier to run for president than it is to do this. And as it turns out, that was absolutely correct. A couple of forms on the website, and I was in the running. I was saying, hey, yeah, I'm seeking the Libertarian nomination.
That's fantastic. Does that? I'm assuming that means that you were a Gary Johnson supporter in 2012.
Yes, I was. I like Gary. I like Gary Johnson. I'll be really honest with you too. I kind of liked Obama at first. You had someone coming in. Yes, he was very much. If you are on the right, he was someone who was very much a ideologically different individual. But I saw him as a needed shakeup sort of thing, and especially early on, with Obama, with Trump, with basically every president in my lifetime, I've looked at them and said, okay, they've got this shot right now. I understand that what you campaign on, what you sell to the base, what you use to reach the populace, and get elected is not necessarily reflective of how you're going to run the country. Especially once you get into the seat, you realize, okay, here's information that I wasn't privy to before. Here's
Right.
that I didn't know was going on behind the curtain. I think that really does change change people's perceptions of some things. Um, so I'm willing to cut the president some slack and see, okay, how are they going to govern? What are they going to do? Are they
Right.
going to go for what would consider to be some really easy, simple, logical? Hey, let's go for pardoning nonviolent drug offenders. Let's go for reducing tensions of the world, bringing troops back home. What are we going to do in order to make the world a better place? And unfortunately, I think in a lot of ways, I've just been sadly disappointed by Democrats and Republicans over the years as that goes.
Yeah. Ironically enough, both Obama and Trump campaigned on what you just said, bringing troops home and fixing our drug laws, and neither one of them really did either of those things. Trump
And
Trump
that's
actually
actually
give him some credit. He did a few things as far as criminal justice reform goes, more than
he didn't start any new wars. So let's give him props for that. But I mean,
right.
really low bar.
He was the least bad president. I wouldn't call him the best president in my lifetime. I'd call him the least bad president in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting because I didn't really pay too much attention to politics in 2008. I was 12. So I really didn't understand what was going on. I heard a bunch of like the racist kind of stuff about like if you don't vote for Obama, you're a racist. And that was really the only thing that hit home and stuck with me from the 2008 campaign. And I didn't really pay attention until 2012, when at that point everyone had all the liberty lovers had been disillusioned with Obama by then, I feel like. So I found it very interesting going back and meeting people that are more like left libertarian and how many people came into the LP from Obama. And I would never have guessed that until meeting these people. But I've met multiple people that worked for Obama than worked for Joe Jorgensen. And that surprised me. I didn't expect to see that pipeline really exist at all, let alone be as big as it was.
I think what it comes down to is like you said, disillusionment. These are people who want to get out and want to make changes. They want to change the world. They see that what is out there right now. To be very honest, in the United States, what is out there right now, by world standards, is actually really pretty good. So I mean, we've got most everybody has a place to live. Most everybody has enough food to eat. Most everybody, up until coronavirus, was doing well. Had a job or the opportunities that they needed. There were some really extensive social safety nets funded through taxation, but at least they were there. So as far as the rest of the world goes, we were doing pretty good. So what you actually have is a bunch of people looking at it saying, you know what? This could be even better. Mm-hmm. This could be a lot better. We see it's kind of like starting to work on something and doing a first or second or a third draft, and you start to see where it could actually go, and you get excited about it. But then you realize that there's a bunch of other people who really they don't want it to go that way. As a matter of fact, they want to make it worse. That can be frustrating. I think that brings in people from the left. It brings in people from the right. Brings in people from the center. I find myself trying to consciously push against what I would call my predilections, my leanings. Since I come from the right, I try to look at things not through right or left anymore, but try and look at them straight through the lens of liberty. What is going to give most people freedom? What is going to what is going to give most people the opportunity to live their lives the way they want to live them, however that is.
I think that's extremely important. I've talked a decent amount on the show about the difference between libertarian policy and libertarian philosophy. And it's very easy to be very good on libertarian policy and be a Puritan and, anything that's bigger government, anything that's tax funded, anything that's anything towards authoritarian is evil and therefore unlibertarian. And so, you look at people like Andrew Yang and say he's the opposite of liberty. He's campaigning on a tax funded program called UBI. That's clearly not libertarian. So he's not libertarian. Where when you actually take apart his platform and why he's trying to do what he's trying to do, almost all of it has a libertarian basis. He's just a little bit misguided on the effectiveness of government. And a couple more years of participating in politics and he'll learn. Eventually, give him credit. He's only really been doing politics for 2 years. He hasn't hit that disillusionment yet that we're talking about. So, I give people like him credit. Even AOC, especially when she was in her campaign, I believe fully that she thinks that she's doing what's best for her constituents. I think that she saw Bernie Sanders and truly believed that he had the best message for the American people. Obviously, I disagree with that. But if you actually believe that and you're getting into politics to help people, then it's a lot different than getting into politics to gain power and to grow the government.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. You got a lot of people out there. When you ask them, how do you solve the problem of hunger in America? The answer is government. How do you solve the problem of unemployment? Government. How do you solve? We've basically got 100+ years of an experiment in growing the government and giving the government more authority, more control, and I think we're honestly worse off than where we would have been if we had kept the government as small as possible and reduced the influence of government in our lives. The hard part is getting people to understand that and to think about that. I mean, probably a great example. Take someone, take someone who lives out in the Midwest and try to talk to them about, for example, mass transit. It's just something that doesn't fit into their paradigm, right? Because I live 30 minutes away from my neighbor, right? Mass transit simply doesn't work. It doesn't fit in. A lot of people, when you start talking about smaller government, they're in that state where they're like, wait, I don't understand what you're talking about. I can't see how it would possibly work for me. And the answer is that it will, but you need to convince people. You need to get across to people, hey, this is what it would be like without this government overreach. This is what it would be like without this government interference. This is how your life could be better than it is now. And not just you, but the lives of all the people around you.
Right. My last interview was with Stacey Pressman, who's running for mayor of New York City under the Libertarian line. And we were talking about the Second Amendment. And it's basically the flip-flopped version of that. It's something that doesn't exist in New York City. Guns don't exist. People don't know about guns. People don't trust guns. People are scared of guns. They only see them in the movies and on the news when people get shot. And so to try to talk to them about why owning a firearm is a fundamental human right that everyone should have and should exercise and everyone should be armed is the hard conversation to have with them. They don't understand what you're talking about because they don't see guns as that kind of a necessity. And Same thing talking to somebody from the Midwest about affordable housing or mass transit or some of the things that a city dweller would see as a necessity of government.
Ironically, one of the things that I think COVID is helping to underscore is that a lot of these one-size-fit-all government solutions are painful, and not just in an abstract way, but a very real, very hey, this is killing my community. This is literally killing friends and family. And I'm not talking about the disease. I'm talking about I think it was less than 2 or 3 months into the first set of lockdowns that I had a friend report that they lost someone to suicide, and lost a family business, went under, didn't know how they were going to pay their mortgage, had been struggling with depression already, and decided to end it all. So, I mean, a lot of this is striking home that, hey, you know what? What's right for Chicago, what's right for New York is not necessarily what's right for Boise. It's not necessarily what's right for Phoenix. We need to have a lot, not so much a focus on, hey, the government will do it, but there's been a renewed focus on what state and local governments are doing. Um, I kind of get a weird sandwich because you've got the federal government and they've screwed a bunch of stuff up, but they've largely left things to the state. Our state government, I think, has managed to completely and utterly just mess everything up. And then down at the county level, we've got a ton of people here in Allegheny County or Pittsburgh area that will tell you that the governor stinks, but the Allegheny County Health Authority has done a great job, right? Because they're local, because they understand what's going on. They've issued some really good guidance, I think, early on how to deal with being isolated from other people and yet still be able to have an active life and get out and do some things, participate in some outdoor activities for mental health. And as a result, you've got a bunch of people that are looking at things now and going, you know what? It makes a lot more sense to have something like this all the way push as far down as you can, down to the local level, and see what you can handle there. And that gives you a door to say, okay, what else should be being handled at that level? What else is being screwed up at the state level or at the federal government level that really would be better handled at the local level? And that gets people thinking.
Yeah, it has been great to see the focus on like local government lately through this COVID thing. It was really nice to see it click with upstate New York Democrats, because upstate New York Republicans already hate New York City, already hate Albany, and they hate New York City for being the reason that Albany is blue. And so most of the Republicans upstate look at their gun laws and their taxes and some of the other policies and have there we go.
Okay, I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second, David.
Oh, you're good. The Wi-Fi in my house has been acting up the last couple of days. But yeah, so upstate Republicans already kind of understood why localized government is good. And that's why I think New York would be a good state to advance the LP in, because there's a lot of people that already understand why the duopoly is bad. But this year, the Democrats in the upstate cities got to see firsthand why being lumped in with New York City can suck. Because New York City was one of the worst parts of the country during COVID for logical, just math reasons of how many people they have crammed into a little tiny area. But cities like Syracuse and Rochester had almost no cases and like 4 or 5 deaths total for months, and were still in complete lockdown because Cuomo wouldn't separate. And then finally Cuomo decided to let the counties handle everything individually, and upstate started to function again almost instantaneously. And even the Democrats that love Cuomo, that thought that he did a great job doing everything, didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing the whole time, still understood that the county handling it now rather than him has made things better.
Yeah.
Nothing could have taught them that lesson better than COVID, I don't think.
Yeah. And overall, I mean, that's one of the things that you really, it's strange to me because the federal government should have the least effect on anybody. You know, just the way things go, they should be responsible for defense. They should be responsible for negotiations with other countries. Yeah, there we go. There's not a whole lot going on there at the national level. At the local level, you should have a ton of people worried about who's going to be our auditor, who's going to be our tax assessor, who's going to be on the city council, and yet it's completely reversed. We have record number of people that came out to vote in this presidential election because Orange Man bad, or bumbling old senator bad, whatever. And they didn't even bother to vote for down ticket races for the people who will actually impact their lives more over the next 4 years than either one of those two. So getting kind of, just having the opportunity to get across to people that this is important, that is something you need to pay attention to, I think is amazing. It's something we absolutely should be capitalizing on.
Yeah, I don't remember whose quote it is, but it's somebody else's. I can't take credit for it, but it's so I think it was in 2016. They were saying if you care this much about who the president is, they have too much power.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's just, if Thomas Jefferson and even if Alexander Hamilton and John Adams saw what the American government looks like right now, they would be horrified. And they were all for growing it and making it more tyrannical. And even they would be terrified by what we've created.
Yeah, it really is nuts. You look at where we were, and it was actually on the campaign trail. I think it was Dan Berman that really it hit home with me. And he said 100 years ago you could walk into a drugstore, buy cannabis, and like a tincture of cannabis, buy a cocaine cough formula, buy heroin to deal with it, for pain relief for your broken tooth or whatever. And these days, doing any of that would have you, in jail and ruin your life for the rest of your time on Earth. And how did we go from that complete freedom and an era where, even though all those things were readily available, it was never an issue, to being in a place where everything is prohibited, and we've got overdose deaths skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. We screwed something up. There's no question. Something got screwed up, and I think you can honestly trace it back to, hey, we need more government. We need to put the government in control. Whenever you put the government in control, you get more of what you're trying to get rid of, right? War on poverty. What do we have? The same level of poverty. War on drugs. What do we have? More drugs. War on terror. What do we have? We've got 20+ year wars going on overseas that have no end in sight, no end to terrorism.
More terrorism. We have significantly more terrorism now than we did when we started.
If you want something screwed up, get the government involved in it.
Right.
And this probably sounds weird, but as a former military guy, one of the few things that I think that the government actually does or has managed correctly over the last I won't say the last 20 years, but say up until the last 20 years, has been the military. Just because the military has been essentially off on its own institution, something separate from the civilian government, but under civilian control. And what you had was an entirely different culture. Now that you have over the last 20 years or so, since I was in and since I got out, you have a whole lot more civilian government involvement with the military. Hey, what are we doing here? How are we going to run this war? How are we going to let's go ahead and put the brakes on this. We want to micromanage this. You end up with 20, like I said, 20 years in Afghanistan, and nobody knowing what the heck's going on over there. Mm-hmm. Nobody even knowing what the goals are, right? It's ridiculous to me to think that for example, you go back to Eisenhower, you go back to some of the generals in World War II, that they would have allowed that sort of muddying of what's going on to occur. But that's what you have. You basically, you've got the government, the civilian side of the government, just screwing everything up. Contradictory goals, contradictory orders, and you end up with a mess.
Yeah, I think over the last year or so, I've tried my best to kind of back off the harshness of some of my messaging, because two of my biggest issues are ending the wars and police reform. And it caused me to, for my teenage years and young adult years, be very anti-military and anti-police, even though I come from a family of entire military. My dad was a Marine, grandparents were in the Army and the Air Force. I'm basically the first male member of my family tree for like 6 generations to not join the military. Like all my great uncles, all my uncles, like everybody. But I've started to kind of back off of that a lot lately because I don't want to be part of what you're talking about. I don't want to be a civilian that has no idea what they're talking about, that's going in and saying, this is how you need to run a military, because that's moronic to try to pretend that I would be a better commander in chief than someone that's served before. And that's why I loved Tulsi Gabbard and supported her.
Oh, yeah.
She understands what's going on. Even Larry Sharp, has a lot of opinions about the military that he could back up with experience.
Yep. And you've got, I think it's really interesting. You have a lot of current military, former military that are libertarians. And that may seem like a contradiction, but it really doesn't. What is libertarianism at its core? It's individual freedom and individual responsibility. Yep. You mentioned the issue with gun laws. Hey, owning a weapon is a way for me to protect myself, protect my family, protect my neighbors if it comes to that. For a lot of people, joining the military is that logical next step of, hey, I want to go ahead and contribute, and I want to voluntarily serve to protect our nation as a whole. So when you start talking about the men and women who are serving, and I think you saw this with Ken Armstrong. I think Adam Kokesh brought this up at points too. I certainly did. I know that Larry has. There are a lot of people in the military that enter with the best of intentions, and they end up being misused and abused. They're used in ways that, like you mentioned earlier, would have horrified our founding fathers. And the idea that, hey, I want to be someone who defends my country is very different from someone who says, hey, I want to be someone who goes out and destroys someone else's life. So right. I really think it's like you said, it's important to understand. And you mentioned police reform. There's a lot of police that get into doing what they're doing. I've got family members that are in the police department, and understand that a lot of times their goal and their desire there is, hey, a really noble one. I want to help. I want to, I want to be an EMS. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a police officer. Those are all departments that help people. Mm-hmm. And the problem that you run into is that EMS don't go out looking to find people and injure them in order to have a job. You don't have firefighters ideally going out and starting fires in order to keep their job, and yet you have a bunch of laws that essentially police officers find themselves enforcing that they'd really rather not. Mm-hmm. Because they still, the ones who are still in it for the right reasons, they want to catch the bad guys. They want to stop the people who are stealing. They want to stop the people who are hurting other people. They don't want to be busting someone for smoking a joint in the park. They don't want to be busting someone for opening a restaurant when the governor said they shouldn't. Right. So it's just realignment.
Yeah, I used to see like libertarian military, like active military, like libertarian police as a complete contradiction. And I didn't really start to realize how wrong I was about that until I became a contradiction myself as a libertarian politician. I got so many people that, oh, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. You're just giving legitimacy to this terrible organization. And I was hearing a lot of the exact same sentences thrown at me that I had thrown at, cops or people in the military. And that's really what clicked in my brain finally of like, okay, not everyone that's a police officer or in the military is there to kill brown people. Like, that's not the only reason you go into that.
Yeah.
And even though, like, I knew that, I always said, you once you understood how fucked up those systems were, you should have left. And that was my hook of like why it's still contradiction. But participating in politics, falling flat on my face, getting 3% of the vote, and continuing to participate in politics, knowing how uneducated and sometimes idiotic the voter base is, knowing how messed up and rigged against me the political system is, and continuing to participate in it, and as I'm doing currently, is what, finally kind of clicked. I was like, okay, no, these people are hoping that, if I'm not here doing this job, someone else would be, who might be less liberty minded and might do more harm.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
Just being the best option in that career choice of helping people in the way that you're good at, is just as noble, regardless of how evil of a system you're participating in.
Oh yeah. For me, I don't know how it is up in New York and in Pennsylvania. Our sheriffs are elected. I would rather have the most libertarian sheriff that I could possibly get here in Allegheny County. Give me the guy that's going to stand up for life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, who's going to be a fire break for things like shut down all the restaurants. I don't care if it's legal or not. I want you mentioned Trump being the least bad president of the last couple of years. I want the least bad sheriff that I can get. I want the least bad counsel that I can get. I want the least bad whatever, right? And as it stands right now, we've got those institutions. They're there. Someone's going to be filling those. We might as well make sure that we're getting the best option that we can in there, even if it does mean, okay, we still have we still have some positions that we think are needless and really shouldn't be there, but at least we can reduce the harm. And then we can, from there we can see about reducing power. We can see about eliminating positions. We can see about finally, paring back on the government, because that's not something that's going to happen. Let me take that back. That's something that can happen. We know historically can happen from the outside, but whenever it does happen from the outside, it is inevitably bloody. It is inevitably something that causes conflict that echoes for generations, and it is not something that any rational person wants. So, when you look at it that way and you think, okay, my choices are, I either fight the system, which hurts more people than it helps. I work within the system, which is a long slog, or I ignore the system and let it do whatever it wants. I think the best choice there is to do what you can to work within the system and drive it in the direction you want.
Yeah, for sure. I think I had a slogan during my campaign. It was "Elect the Revolution." It's a fairly simple. Just there is a way to do this without bloodshed. You look at movements like the Boogaloo, and I'm ready, right? Like I know my guns, I know what I'm doing, I have my plans for when that goes down. I'm ready if the Boogaloo happens, if that's what it comes to. But I don't want it to happen. I don't.
No sane person does. Yeah.
Right. I've met plenty of insane people that fully, like, they're ready. They've given up on any hopes of being able to, quote unquote, elect the revolution. They think that that's hopeless. They see campaigns like Larry Sharp's or George Jorgensen or Gary Johnson, and they say, this isn't going to happen through the political system. I think they're giving up a little too soon. I
think so too. You look at what we had this election cycle. I think it's Wyoming, Bethany Valdez. Barely. I mean, like a matter of a handful of votes. Came within a handful of votes of winning. I believe it was a state house seat. or maybe even a state Senate seat. We've seen some libertarians, elected at the state level for the first time. We've got a libertarian congressman for the first time. We've got, which leads to great things like phrases in the press like tripartisan, legislation, which is fantastic.
That word, it's my favorite word
Yep.
in the news.
Seriously, three of the most influential people I think in Congress right now are Tulsi Gabbard, Justin Amash, and Thomas Massie. Right? You have a Republican, a Libertarian, and a Democrat who are all able to agree on a bunch of issues. This goes back to when I was growing up, when a time when Republicans and Democrats would fight tooth and nail over some things that were very fundamental differences, and yet even we're able to put those aside and say, you know what, here's something else that it just doesn't make sense, that this is the way things are. We're going to change it. We're going to try and make things better. And with seriously, with some libertarian influence in the mix, I think you have the opportunity to see some hearts and minds changed at at that level. You're seeing people like paying more. You mentioned earlier, paying more attention to libertarians. I had a gentleman that just before I got on this call with you that I was talking to about organizing a county up north in Pennsylvania, and he's been meaning to and thinking about it for a couple of years. I said what spurred him this time was the number of Joe Jorgensen signs and libertarian signs that he saw this last election cycle up in his county. These are people who aren't libertarian stalwarts. This isn't a county where we've got a committee organized. This isn't some bastion of libertarianism. This is just a place where a bunch of ordinary people said, wow, these guys suck. I like this other candidate better. So I think we really are. We're breaking through. We're gaining traction. We're getting attention, and the right thing to do is not to give up, not to despair. Jerry Pournelle was a great author. I loved reading him growing up, and one of the things that I remember from him recently, some of his articles that he wrote online before he died, was he kept circling back to talking politics and saying despair is a sin, right? When you give up, when you despair, when you say there is no possibility of change, I don't know what your theological background is, but if you are a Catholic, if you're a Christian, that's a sin to not have hope. And if you have hope, that means you fight. And if you're going to fight, you do it the best you can with the tools you have, and that means getting involved in the political process.
Right. I love that. That is words to live by for sure. Yeah, I think looking at 2020, it's easy to get sad about Joe Jorgensen's numbers, and I've definitely participated in that conversation plenty of times. And what could we have done better? What did we mess up on? Plenty of hypothetical. What if Amash had stayed in? What if we had picked Vermin Supreme? What if we'd picked you? How would we have done better? I've participated in plenty of those conversations, but I will definitely say, I see the Joe Jorgensen sign behind you. I saw more of those blue bumper stickers traveling the country this year than I have ever seen anything libertarian in the 5 years that I've been active in the movement. I was all over the country. I worked in 14 different states this year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was a busy year. I worked on over a dozen campaigns across 3 parties, almost 4.
Wow.
It was a busy year.
Dude, I did like 2 campaigns, one after the other, and holy cow, I'm surprised you're still standing.
Well, to be fair, a lot of those were contracted positions for either signature gathering or door knocking. and it was 3 weeks in South Carolina knocking doors for the GOP, and I was out of there. I spent 2 weeks in Massachusetts. Then there were other campaigns that were a lot more heavy-handed. I was helping put together a 2021 campaign in New York City for a lot of the year. I worked for almost 2 full months in Michigan on a state house campaign with the Young Americans for Liberty. And then obviously I spent a long time with Tulsi. That didn't stop until like mid-March. But yeah, it was interesting, but I've met more people in this year than I've met my entire life combined, I feel like. And to my initial point, like, I've met more libertarians this year than I've ever met. And just in my day-to-day life, I didn't work a libertarian campaign really at all. I didn't work a Libertarian 2020 campaign at all this year. The only thing I did with the LP was setting up that campaign for next year. And now I'm working on another one for next year. But I was knocking registered Republican doors and registered Democrat doors, or like just in the streets canvassing for a broad ballot initiative for like gay rights, or I carried the Unlock Michigan petition for a little while, and I met people all over the place with Jo Jorgensen signs. I got handed Jo Jorgensen literature 4 or 5 times while I was out canvassing. I had a guy staying at an Airbnb with me in Detroit that had a yard sign in his back window, 2 bumper stickers on his car, and he gave every person in the Airbnb a flyer of hers and promised to let them know when Jo was going to be in Detroit, because she was planning an event there at the time. And like, hardcore missionary, just randomly happened to be staying at the same Airbnb as me. So numbers wise, Jo didn't do so well, but I think movement wise, she had a lot. She had so many more life or death supporters than Gary Johnson ever had.
Yeah, she picked up a lot of enthusiasm. Something people don't I guess don't stop and think about is Gary Johnson was a name on the national scene. He was a governor. When he made his first presidential bid, and Jo, who is basically a lecturer from Clemson, in the middle of the most hotly contested presidential election ever in the United States, managed to do as well as he did with national name recognition in 2012. So I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. The way that Jo ran her campaign, relying on libertarian volunteers, really, we're already seeing that make a huge impact. We've got a couple of state candidates here looking at 20 runs in 2022, and who is making up their campaign staff right now? It's former Jo Jorgensen staffers. These are people who've gotten a handle on, okay, this is what media is like in a campaign. This is what logistics is like in a campaign. This is what messaging needs to be worked out, and we're developing some expertise. So I mean, in another, I'm thinking another 4 years, 6 years, you're going to have a cadre of individuals in Pennsylvania, at least. I don't know about other states, but here we're going to have these individuals who are able to say, yeah, you want to run for state house. Here's how we do it. Here's where we go. Here's who we talk to. Here's how we crunch the numbers. Here's the data analytics that we look at. Here's the material logistics that we look at. Here's the door knocking plan that we look at. And we need that to compete on the same level with the Democrats and the Republicans. And there's a ton of opportunities here in Pennsylvania, and probably nationally, but my focus now is my own state. But there's a ton of opportunities here where you've got things like, oh yeah, here's a neighborhood where there's a Democrat that's run uncontested for the last 3 elections, or a Republican that's run uncontested for the last 2 elections. They've never had someone come in and really run a race against them. And a libertarian is uniquely suited to, in either of those cases, to really get in and make life suck for those guys and make them work for a win.
Yeah.
Seriously, you get the right, you get someone who's in Democratic stronghold, and you throw in a libertarian like you with a background in advocacy for criminal justice reform, and they're going to be having a hard time, especially if they're explaining why to their constituents why they're supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris with their tough on crime, and hey, no, we're not going to look at legalizing marijuana at the national level. Flip it over to the Republican side. You're going to have a bunch of people where the libertarians are going to be going, yeah, I don't understand why Representative so and so doesn't seem to care that your Second Amendment rights are being infringed. Right? I thought he was a Republican. We can make life hard for these guys, and we can push them. Even if we don't win, we can push them in a libertarian direction. We can make them change their policies in order to appeal to the people that we would peel away, which means they have to become more libertarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have to either become more libertarian or admit that they're really a dirty centrist. Try to. We saw in New York a race. Tom Quieter ran for Senate, and it was a two-way race against a Republican, and he ran to the right of the Republican on almost every issue, including the war, the spending, gun control, and just hammered home, and forced the candidate to basically show his hand and start campaigning towards the Democrats, because it is actually like a 60-40 split district. There's a lot of Democrats. It contains both Binghamton and I think Cortland. So, fairly blue college, very liberal stronghold cities that, even like Bernie Sanders went to and campaigned in heavily. So he had to go and actually try to campaign to that 40% of the Democrats to get the win. And he did. Unfortunately, Tom only got, I believe, about 12%. But that's still big numbers as far as the LP is concerned, in recent memory. I got
it's big numbers. Yeah. If you look at Tom coming out of nowhere, and Tom's a fantastic guy. He busted his butt for that campaign. But he coming out of nowhere and getting 12% of the vote. Mm-hmm. Holy cow. That is, if you are a Democrat or you are a Republican, you've got to be looking at that, and you're crapping your pants right now, because 10% of the population looking and saying we want a third choice. That's the tipping point for, okay, now there's enough people that I know that voted for that I don't feel alone anymore. And we're emboldened. We're going to go out and we're going to talk. And next time around, it's not going to be 10%. It's going to be 15. It's going to be 20. I'm fully convinced that at the state and local level, we're going to start to see libertarians just clawing their way up the ladder in terms of voting percentage, until we start seeing wins, and we basically we start being taken seriously.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ricky Harrington out in Arkansas.
Arkansas, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Starter moment. 30+% is a huge deal. Just his existence in politics. I think Rainwater in Indiana was another big like beacon of hope to the liberty movement, as well as the multiple actual victories that we had on state and local levels are huge deals for what's going to happen in 22. And I see next year New York City, almost every politician in New York City is up for re-election next year. I see that as a huge opportunity to do what you're talking about and embolden the upstate voters to finally give up on the Republican Party. If we can pull
Yeah.
7 to 10% in a citywide election and prove that Larry in 22 can pull that and more, it's going to lead the people upstate to be like, hey, if all the Republicans upstate voted gold and all the Libertarians downstate vote gold, Larry beats Cuomo and we get rid of Cuomo. So, people are going to start doing that math and realizing that we make up a big enough chunk of the city to not make it influence the statewide election as much.
Right.
And we actually have a shot. So that's why I'm working with Stacey Pressman down there, and I'm really excited about potential that we have to maybe change New York State politics in the next 2 years.
Oh, that would be awesome, man.
That's
oh, holy cow. That would be amazing.
Right. I would love to see, I'm a realist. Some people call me a pessimist. I like to call myself a realist. I don't quite see a world necessarily where Larry wins in 2022, but I do see a world where he pulls 30+% in 22 and then wins in 26. I see that as a very solid possibility.
Yep.
And I think, the Northeast is specifically suited for the liberty message in a way that, a lot of people talk about like New Hampshire or Colorado or, even like Oregon as, oh, well, they're already so liberty, it would be so easy to flip them to libertarian. And I think that's flawed logic because, like we were saying earlier, you need that disillusionment. You need people to be pissed off at their government. And in Colorado, people aren't. Their government works fairly well in Colorado. There's no real reason to be a libertarian in Colorado. The Republicans care about the budget. The Democrats actually care about criminal justice and social safety nets and stuff like that. If you're a duopoly person in Colorado, you're fairly well represented. You get the things that you want. You have lots of gun rights. You have lots of drug freedom. You have a lot of economic freedom. So there's no real reason to be a libertarian in Colorado. New Hampshire, your only real reason is if you care about drug laws, because that's the only thing that they're really crappy on. Other than that, they don't even have seatbelt laws. Like, how can you be mad at your government if they're not even yelling at you to put on a seatbelt? It's going to be difficult. Where you have, especially like Western and upstate New York, has been controlled by a city government basically for years, and they've seen how bad it is. States like Ohio and Pennsylvania are very similar, where they've gotten to see what government malfunction looks like firsthand and how it can destroy their families and their lives and their careers. So I'm very excited to see, especially those three states like New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio do some awesome stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, what's the song? Is it My Way? If I can make it in New York, I can make it anywhere, right? If you can do liberty in New York, if you can do it in Pennsylvania, if you can do it in Ohio, those three very kind of conservative, very traditional states. If you can get that message out and get it resonating with people, it'll play all over the country. So we've got a real hotbed up here. We've got an opportunity to make some interesting things happen.
Yeah, and I think New York is obviously a national trendsetter pretty consistently, and has its advantages for liberty. But I think like Ohio and Pennsylvania have a strategic advantage that their governments are already somewhat localized in a somewhat successful way, to where it would be very easy for the Libertarian Party to take over a county and actually actively demonstrate what a libertarian government would look like, actually create the change that they want to see, without actually having to replace a governor or a president or a majority of Congress for us to really be able to prove our point that libertarian government works. Ohio, you can take over a town and just do whatever not whatever you want, but there's so little state control over municipalities in Ohio, that you can run it as an ANCAP like utopia and prove why that
Yeah.
actually could work. And you could do it with an ANCOM town as well. You can actually effectively change things pretty well from like a city council and a mayor seat. You don't
Yeah.
have to climb up so far.
The interesting thing for me is, you mentioned an ANCOM town. We got those here in Pennsylvania. You head out into Amish country, right?
Right.
You see a bunch of people. They don't like the government. They don't want the government messing around with them. They just want to live their life the way they want to live their life, and it works for them.
Mhm.
And it's not the way I would choose to live my life, but
Right.
hey, more power to them for doing what they want. I would really like to see, basically, you look at the country, and you look at people, and people talk about government all the time. They talk about what's the government doing here, and what's the government doing there, and what's this and the last time I had to interact with the government seriously was last month when I was filling out my driver's license registration. Before that, if I hadn't been active and running for an office, my last interaction would have been sometime around February when I submitted my taxes. People don't interact with the government a lot. They are worried, and they are focused, and they are hyper vigilant about what is going on at a level of government that really does not impact them most of the time.
Right.
And even when you start talking about things like, oh yeah, well that's easy for you to say, Sam. You've never had to be on unemployment. Well, one, yes, I have, but two, that's something handled at the state level, right? That's not federal government. Even when you do end up interacting with government, most of the time it's at the state and local level. You really have limited interaction with the federal government. If 90% of the federal government were to disappear overnight, it would take you probably close to a year to realize it if nobody told you. And if we can get people to realize that, to understand that, we can start making some real changes. We can push things down to the states, empower the states. We can, if Ohio wants to run things and have really good social safety nets, and people are happy paying taxes there, and people down in West Virginia, they don't care about that, but they're big on putting together self-help organizations and charitable organizations, and that's how they want to run things. That's fantastic. That's how the United States was designed. 50 little laboratories of liberty, 50 little places where we can look at things and decide what works for us, at our level, and make things work. And what works for New York might not work for Pennsylvania, but that's okay. It works for the people that it needs to work for.
Mm-hmm. That should definitely be a slogan if you run again in 24. 50 little laboratories of liberty. I love
That's
that.
Probably somebody else probably said. I read it somewhere and it percolated up. So
yeah, I think that a good demonstration, and libertarians get shit on for this all the time, but a good illustration of how well a state government or a county government is working is the roads. You drive into Ohio from anywhere, and you notice the difference. Same with like Kansas and Colorado. I noticed very specifically this year. Like, you drive into those states and you notice a difference. They build their roads better. They just do a better job at maintaining their roads. Their government works more efficiently, replaces the roads faster, cares more about it, and they have better roads. New York roads suck. Pennsylvania is not much better, but then you drive into Ohio and it's great. And then you get through Ohio and you get into Michigan, and it's the worst. Like, Michigan roads are some of the absolute worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. Michigan and South Carolina this year were like just awful.
Yep. It's weird. Did you guys get the snow these last couple of days before Christmas came in?
Yeah.
We got that. We got dumped on for about 3 days, and day after Christmas, we went out to see my in-laws, visit with them for a little bit, and we noticed that our local roads, and I'm going to give a shout out here to Bernie, who is our local roads guy. He is the master of roads in Fraser Township, Pennsylvania. Bernie is amazing. I love him. He's a fantastic guy. We had our road. Our road was clear. All the Fraser Township roads are clear. The roads that we had to drive on that were still sheets of ice and really crappy, state roads, right? State roads had, our local roads have been plowed because we care. We've got somebody who cares. He lives here. He wants to make sure that we're all taken care of, that everything, that everything's, up to par. The state roads we got off them and onto back roads as quickly as we could because it was the local roads that were taken care of. You care about the things that impact you. You care about. I was visiting with my aunt last week, and they've got a developer that's working on turning a former like summer camp into a more upscale resort area. But one of the things that they're going back to him and holding him accountable for is their roads, because he's bringing in a ton of heavy equipment. It's chewing up the roads. It's causing all sorts of problems. And they said, listen, we have, we are responsible for maintaining these roads here, in our community. This is what we do. And you're causing some damages because you're using them heavily in a way that was not intended. Let's talk about whether you're going to be able to continue to use these roads, or how you can continue to use these roads, which is basically, hey, can you pay for the damage you've done? And that's because they as a community care about it, right? Do you think someone in
about it?
What was that?
Was he chill about the situation?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one of those things that it's the cost of doing business. He understood that was something he was going to have to deal with. But if you think about it, everybody in that community cared because it was impacting them. Somebody at the county level, they might have paid attention to it. They might have come out and taken a look at it, or written a sternly worded letter to someone about possible consequences. Someone at the state level would be like, where the heck is Watersonville? Why do I care? How are they voting for me? Right? So I mean, when you get right down to it, you care, and you make things happen and make things work at your local level.
Yeah, I think that the more that we can get good people like Bernie into jobs in the government, and people get to meet them and interact with them and understand what local governance really looks like, the message of liberty will be very easy to spread at that point. Because
definitely
the LP it's all just localization. Like you said, it's pretty simply, individual liberty and individual responsibility, which just means decentralization or localization to the max. Ideally localized all the way down to your house, which requires you to actually care about your house and not just put all of that responsibility off onto other people. And because I don't think that's ever going to happen, I don't think we're ever going to get to a society where everyone's good on individual responsibility. We're just never going to be completely successful. Best we're going to get is localized government, down to the city level at least. And we have so many amazing mayors in our country, regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum, people that actually got into government to help people. I think we just need to, get back to where we were 60, 70 years ago, where people actually cared about who their mayor was.
Yep, absolutely.
Their mayor cared about their mayor.
And something you mentioned, and it was kind of casual, but I appreciate it because this is something that I think gets lost in the discussion about liberty. You mentioned personal responsibility. And that's the flip side. It's a coin. That's one side you've got liberty, the other side you've got responsibility. If you are exercising, making choices that for yourself and for your family that are right for you, then you are also responsible for making those choices. And those choices, when they impact other people, when you decide that you're going to build a concert venue on your property behind the old folks retirement home for nervous Nellies, right? You've got some responsibility there,
Mhm.
right? You have that liberty, you need that responsibility as well. I think what we see, honestly, the best parts of the Libertarian Party, the best parts of libertarianism as a philosophy, is when you see that combination of personal liberty and personal responsibility. When you see people helping each other, when you see people taking responsibility for their actions and living their lives, making choices for their lives in a way that is respectful of others, that gets a message across to people that you really just don't get from the Democrats or the Republicans, who seem to, honestly have either overemphasized responsibility and de-emphasized liberty, or overemphasized in other areas, overemphasized liberty and de-emphasized responsibility. Libertarianism works because it is the blend of the two, and the understanding that you can't have one without the other.
Amen. Yeah, I think the best illustration and the worst illustration of this within the Libertarian Party is the ideas about the Second Amendment and then taxes. Because you can see very clearly in the Libertarian Party and the Liberty Movement and just the gun rights movement in general, a very good illustration of both sides of this coin. Every gun activist I know is super heavy on education, on personal safety, on gun safety, on proper maintenance and handling, and all of this stuff. They want to train every single person that they change their mind. Make sure that they're going to continue to be able to say things like guns don't kill people, people kill people. If you put guns into the hands of a bunch of morons that don't know how to handle it, you're going to have guns start killing people. Like, that sentence isn't going to be true
Yeah.
anymore, because you're just going to have too many accidents to really make that claim anymore. So you see a very good illustration of that. Then you go and look at like our views on taxes and fiscal responsibility. The charitability of the average libertarian is pretty non-existent.
Yeah, that hurts.
And that's not to say that it's non-existent completely, because I know some very amazing philanthropic libertarians who really are out there trying to change their community for the better in all sorts of ways. But the average conversation at a libertarian meeting, no one's talking about how can we organize a food drive, or how can we, get a soup kitchen going once a month or something like that. It's just not a conversation that you hear very often. It's not something that we do. Where if we want to get rid of welfare, we need to make up for it in charity, and we can't just expect the rich people to do that, because we're doing the exact same thing that the DSA is doing, of just like, oh, if we make everything the way we want it, the rich people handle it and we'll be fine. And we fall into that trap in the exact same way that they do. We think without taxes, all of a sudden these people that are getting taxed heavily are going to have so much money and not know what to do with it, and be like, oh, I should give it to charity, and magically all the world's problems will be solved. And that's bullshit.
Yeah. It's a long-term project. We didn't get, I mentioned before, you go back 100 years and life was very different. You had social organizations, you had religious organizations, you had professional organizations, workmen's organizations that all fulfilled a lot of fulfilled a lot of the responsibilities that have been taken on by the federal government and by state governments these days. That didn't happen overnight. That wasn't a flip the switch and all of a sudden everybody did things differently. It took a long time. It's going to take a long time to back out of this I'll speak in terms I'm familiar with. It's to deal with this addiction. What we have going on is an addiction to government, and there's there's a lot of hard time if you're dealing with that. There's a lot of hard times that go on with quitting something cold turkey. Um, it can be a uh, big disruption in life, and it basically causes you to make some really big changes in your life. And you don't do that until you are absolutely convinced that where you are is at the bottom, and the only way up is to make that change. I think we've got a long way to go before we get to that point. And again, that's going to be possibly going to be a very disruptive sort of change. Our best bet is to start using the analogy here, start to wean people off of government, to start getting to the point where you look at the anti-smoking campaigns, that hit us in the 70s or so, just when I was growing up, 70s and 80s. um, Huge reductions in smoking in the United States. It's no longer fashionable. It's no longer something that people do. It's not depicted favorably on TV or in movies anymore. It's something out of the ordinary, and that has changed culture, but it took a long time. Same thing for you talk about the civil rights movement. You talk about any sort of change in society. You're talking about generations, not doing it overnight. And if we can start making changes now and start pushing in those directions, we're going to see that it's a long time to undo things, but we can do it. And like you said, we can demonstrate that at the local level. We can demonstrate that bit by bit, piece by piece. But part of that involves, you know, libertarians stepping up, taking responsibility, and doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to stay on your analogy of smoking, we need to fill two different uh, things that you have when you quit smoking. We need to be able to be both the nicotine patch that deals with the more serious problem, if that's what you have, if it's an actual like chemical dependency that you need to be weaned off of. If you're
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
government assistance, basically, if your life is dependent on government at the moment, we need to kind of wean you off of it in a way where it's still there. We're not just making you quit cold turkey. But
Mhm.
also, we need to be able to be the lollipop that people use to just kind of get the oral fixation and the fidgetiness when that's all it is. When it's just a psychosomatic addiction and all it is you need to be smoking something or doing something with your mouth and with
Yep.
your hands. There's a non-chemical, non-government solution like charity, like
Mhm.
localization, like personal responsibility. There's some ways to really convince people and replace government completely and just completely privatize facets of the government, like the FDA, for instance.
Yeah.
It would be that's one where you can just go in with that kind of a mentality and just completely uh, it with liberty. So we need
And
to be able to do both of those.
yeah, and there are the wonderful thing about that. I'm glad you brought up the FDA. Is no, this
Fuck
was
the FDA.
this. Oh yeah, well, here, yeah. Look at where we are. Hey,
Right.
let's distribute contaminated test kits early on in the year. No, the thing about that is when you start talking to people and they say, "Wow, you can't privatize something like the FDA." We already have. Look at Underwriter Labs. I've got pretty much every bit of electronic equipment I have in this house has a little UL tag on it. It's been tested. It's been safety inspected. It's been rigorously, made sure it's safe. And that's all. That's all through a private organization, not through the government. Um, you so you're telling me we can't do the same thing with food? There's already holy cow, there's already, the Cheese Integrity Institute, right? Or whatever. They're out there because that's their business. That's, it is important for them for people to understand that when they say that something is safe to eat and that this is quality cheese, that it's quality cheese, right? That's their bottom line. It's critically important to them, right?
Yeah.
We can make it happen. We can make that work. We did make that work until the government got involved. And then here's what happens. It's a lot easier to just say, okay, yeah, the government takes care of it. I don't have to worry about it. And now, now there's, all of a sudden you're not quite as interested in what's going on because the government's going to take care of it. That's somebody else's job. And the truth of the matter is, when it's somebody else's job, they don't care as much as you do.
Right. And they never will. There's no world where they will care as much as you do. I love talking about the FDA. It's one of my favorite arguments to get into with statists. If I'm actually trying to like debate someone on the importance of government, if I'm in that mode, I'm not really trying to win them over for a candidate or do politics correctly. I'm just trying to argue with somebody because it's fun. FDA is my favorite topic and I always bring up kosher food and organic food. Because neither one of them have any government oversight, and you have hundreds of millions of people across the world that trust those stamps. Kosher specifically is a great example because there's a lot of competition in that market. There are, if you go to a ethnic food store where they sell a bunch of Jewish food, you'll see their kosher stamps are different. And there's actually a competitive market there that I'm more familiar with than the organic one. I don't know if it's as competitive, but there's a competitive market there that actually drives them to be better than their competition and makes sure that they're doing it correctly, which, any libertarian knows is the problem with government, is that it is always a monopoly and it never has an outside force forcing it to be good.
Right.
So, yeah, the FDA is completely unnecessary.
And that's actually fascinating. I did not know that about the kosher and organic labels. I'm gonna have to. Oh, I kind of knew that about kosher. I didn't realize it about organic. I'm gonna have to dig into that because like you said, being able to find these examples. Hey, here's something that shows that individuals working together provide a better outcome than what you get from the government. Holy cow! Could you imagine what kosher regulations would look like if the government was involved? I mean,
these people already have to go through FDA regulations, and then they have to do another testing to make sure that they're kosher. The one caveat I will say that I think I misspoke a little bit on the organic thing, because I do believe that the FDA has entered that market in a way, I think, at this point, to where they're also distributing that organic seal in some cases. But I know that it started out as a completely, privatized market.
Gotcha.
But it's very easy to monopolize something that you already, if you're already testing every food in the world or in the country, to be like, oh, we'll also say it's organic. It's simple business for people to do it through the FDA rather than a private company. And that's what government does. It kills the private market and forces things into this monopoly situation that is never good for anybody.
No, it's not. Good. And I mean, when sometimes you can get across to people, like you said, if you just want to argue, sometimes you do. I hate to say it. Sometimes you do. You just want to argue. You're not going to change anybody's mind.
Yeah.
But other times you want to. What was that?
So you bit your tongue too much in the pleasantry conversations, campaign conversations, and family conversations. Sometimes you just need to let loose.
Let loose. But other times when you're trying to convince someone, things like, hey, have you ever been stuck in a situation where you only had one grocery store? I mean, we've been in that situation. And it stinks, right? You've got to drive an hour because you want to get taco shells because they didn't bother to stock taco shells. this past week or whatever, or they don't carry it at all because I don't eat tacos. Who in the world eats tacos? So you end up, yeah. Sometimes you can really drive it home and say, and this is what it's like, when the government's involved. You only have one source, you only have one place to go, and sometimes you really only want one place to go. But other times, hey, you want to be able to have that choice because what Joe over here thinks is right to stock in his store is not the same thing that Salim over here wants to stock, and it's not the same that O'Keefe has over here. And you want to be able to go make your choices, and probably, in all honesty, you want to patronize all three under different circumstances, right? If you had multiple FDA labels, or you had a decentralized FDA. You split them up and you said, okay, now we have independent organizations that are funded through different manners, and they're responsible for different areas of food safety. You might pay attention to the Fruit Growers Association label on your fruit stuff. But when it comes to wine, yeah, that's fruit, but you're paying more attention to the California Wine Association, right? You can pick and choose which ones mean more to you. Outside of that realm entirely.
About how good your sorry.
Yeah. No. Maybe you don't care, or maybe there's other considerations that you have
on some of the things. Yeah. If you already shop at McDonald's, you probably don't 100% care about what's going anybody. Like, sometimes maybe you're willing
just give me my nuggets.
$3 off. Right. Sometimes you're willing to just, you don't have the money or whatever. You'll choose to ignore all of the labels and risk it, and that's also okay. And you can have the freedom to do that. But that you're risking putting your body at harm because it doesn't have any of these regulatory stamps on it.
Yep.
But you still have the freedom to shop and buy it.
Yeah. Hey, and anybody, I'll be honest here. If anybody who has ever gone out to like a Dollar Tree and bought an Apple iPhone charger or whatever, you are taking your life into your own hands right there. Okay, you go online, you can find the guys that tear these things apart, and they are scary, some of the things they find. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you look at it and you go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't need that level of quality, so I don't care about it. Sometimes you have other considerations. I mean, I mentioned earlier, brought faith up. I'm a Christian. I'm a preacher. I take my faith seriously. I try not to make a big deal of it in the political realm because I think that's kind of cheesy. But sometimes there are things that hey, you know what? I would rather not patronize this chain or this establishment or whatever because because their background or because of their stances or statements that they've made or positions they've made as a company. So even if they're the gold-plated standard for hamburgers, you know what? I'm going to go to Bob's Hamburger Shack down the road. Yeah, they're a B rating, but I've got some other considerations that come into play. So
my mom
that
will
freedom's important.
My mom will pick going to Hobby Lobby over like AC Moore, Joanne Fabrics any chance she gets because she knows that they're an organization that donates to charity that's very faith-based in everything that they do, that they get Sundays off, and that they care about the faith of their employees and respecting that, and they're not dickish about it. There's some criticism to be shared about like Chick-fil-A. Hobby Lobby hasn't really gotten caught up in any of that either. So, there's no real negative to giving them your dollars. So yeah, I think, voting with your dollars is an important piece of a truly capitalistic, like libertarian world. You need to care about who's getting
And
the money.
and the government takes that away from you. It takes away that option in a lot of areas. Um, Another example, and a non-religious example, for those of you paying attention who want something like that for when you're talking to your friends. Um, my girls are adopted. I've got three adopted daughters, and one of the places that I do prefer to patronize is Wendy's over McDonald's, over Burger King, because um, oh, his name escaped me, Dave, whatever, founder of Wendy's. It's
Yeah,
on the tip of my tongue.
it's,
um, but he was a big proponent of adoption. So I mean, we would
Dave
go out of our way. What was that?
Yeah.
Dave Thomas.
Dave
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you,
We would
Siri.
go out of our way as a family to patronize Wendy's because, oh, hey, he supports organizations and he's got a general worldview that we really appreciate as adoptive parents. So if there was only one mandated approved burger place, because choice is confusing. Why would you make people choose? We'd be robbed of that. We'd be robbed of the ability to choose, what kind of hamburgers we want, whether we want flame broiled or grilled, or whether we want those delicious Five Guys fries with them, or the stringy, potato patch or potato skin fries that my wife likes, that you can get from some places. And it's all about making those choices. Government robs you of those choices and tells you this is what's best for you across the board.
Right. That's a really solid example. It's funny because conversely, my sister now goes out of her way to eat at McDonald's over like Burger King and Wendy's because she
Oh, really?
actually stayed in a Ronald McDonald house when my niece was born. She was born with a heart defect, and so she had to spend the first like 6 or 7 weeks of her life in the hospital, like 4 or 5 surgeries. And during that time, my sister, who lived about an hour away from that hospital, was staying at a Ronald McDonald house in Syracuse,
Yep.
and now will go out of her way to shop or to eat at McDonald's, and always rounds up to give that extra money to the Ronald McDonald house every time she goes. And anytime
Yep.
they ask, "Oh, can you give $1 for a coupon book?" Like I've never seen her say no. My niece is now 2, so this has been quite some time of a noticeable change in her attitude towards a restaurant based off of what they do in their private life.
And it goes to show you too that people will give, people will support those organizations and those agencies and those activities that they approve of and that have had a direct impact on them. My wife and I, we had a house fire about 6 years ago. When we see friends or family or people in our area that have had house fires, when we hear reports of that, our heart goes out to them. Our pocketbook gets open, right? We give because we know what it's like to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Somebody else might not, but there's other situations that they feel moved by. But it's all about choice. And honestly, when you give people the choice and the ability to make those sorts of choices, I think a lot of times you'll find that you're surprised at the number of people who actually will give and will support. It might not be what you would be able to get by extorting taxes from people, but it certainly is enough to run an efficient operation, I think, in a lot of cases.
Right. That kind of touches on a point that I was thinking about earlier. We're talking about the government always being a monopoly, and unfortunately, in business, monopolies are more profitable. They always work better.
Yeah.
In some objective fashion.
They work better for the people owning the monopolies.
Right.
Yes.
But also in like noticeable ways for the people shopping. It works better in some ways. Like there is something to be said about Walmart being a very well-run, efficient company that can get most of the things that you need at a fairly cheap price. Whether or not they're good to their employees, whether or not it's of good quality, whether or not they have good ethics, that's a whole different matter. But, because they've monopolized on so many things, Amazon is another great example. They've expanded so much and become such a superpower that they're able to do things that no one else in their competition is able to do. And government has also been able to do this. And because they've had 50, 60 years at some specific monopolies, the idea of breaking up that monopoly is just as crazy to some people as like breaking up Facebook or Amazon or YouTube. Like, how are we going to break up those monopolies? It just doesn't make sense. How do you distribute that job? I think that looks the same when you talk about breaking up the FDA. Like, how do you take this well-oiled monopoly that's been doing this for so long and somehow redistribute that? Like, how do you redistribute Google? Like, Google only works is as popular as it is because you can go to one source.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. I find it amusing you bring up Google because it doesn't matter. You just have to wait 3 years. They'll cancel whatever it is that you're using, anyways. But trying to get that across to people is hard. And I think an essential part of it is kind of you brought it up, talking about the FDA, talking about some of the other organizations, government organizations, is to kind of get away from what they're doing and back to what the effect is that you're looking for. Because you say, okay, what does the FDA do? Well, they protect us from bad food and blah 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 blah. And they're a huge organization. You couldn't create something to do all that, right? But you can create an organization that's responsible for making sure that kosher food meets certain standards, right? And if it doesn't get this label, it isn't considered kosher. You can make sure that there is an organization that is responsible for testing electronic equipment. And if it doesn't meet certain standards, it doesn't get this label, and people know that that's the label that you look for that says that, yeah, this is the good thing to go for. So you kind of have to break it down, I think, and say, yes, I understand we have a huge government and it's grown over these last 60, 70, 80, 100 years. But just because it's huge doesn't mean that the job it's doing is irreplaceable. Just because great example, right? Just because Sears is a huge company with stores all over the world. They've got entire lines of products that they deliver. You used to be able to go into a catalog on in your mailbox and order a house from them. Sears would deliver to you everything that you needed to build a small house. Someone would look at them and say, how could you possibly do what Sears does? And the answer is, well, you know what? Nobody could do what Sears does because Sears is Sears. But here's the thing. There are companies out there that can make better hardware than Sears. There are companies out there that can make better houses than Sears. There are companies out there that can make better clothing than Sears.
Right.
And all Sears was good at was packaging it and selling it. Amazon came along, they're doing a better job packaging and selling. Sears isn't there anymore. But someone would have looked at that and said, well, there's no way Amazon could have displaced Sears because they don't make hammers, they don't make clothing, they don't make tractors, they don't build houses. Yeah, but they understood what Sears really did and they replaced it.
Right.
If we understand what a lot of these government agencies really do, I think we really can replace it, because most of what they do, honestly, is decide whether you deserve to get some of the money that they took from somebody else. You get that across, and you realize that A lot of times what happens is that the federal government asks the state government asks the county government asks the local government, the local government asks some guy sitting in a cubicle, how much money do we need for addiction support this year, right?
Yep.
You boil it down, and really what it comes down to is you'd be better off getting rid of all those other layers and just giving that guy in that cubicle, hey, by the way, Bernie, here's $20,000 for addiction support this year. We took up a collection. You said that's how much you needed. We got it for you. So,
right. Yeah, I really love that you brought in, the retail world and how it's advanced through the free market, because you can objectively say that Amazon is better than Sears, in almost every way. They don't make the stuff, so there is one thing that Sears could claim superiority over, and that's manufacturing. But like you said, that's not necessary. That Amazon proved that Sears didn't have to be doing that to do what they did. So then you look at the government monopolies that have existed for years and years, say, what if the FDA could have been improving over the last 60 years through free market? What kind of new seals could we have on food that nobody's thinking about? And this is definitely a parody and a joke, but there's an old YouTube video from a gentleman named Julian Smith that was an ad for pre-blessed food. And it was, it was this whole like telemarketer ad of like, do you hate wasting time before every meal, having to pray for your food? You're on the run, you have a busy day, buy pre-blessed food. And, obviously a parody, but stuff like that could exist if we had kind of given the free market the ability to do weird things, because the free market does weird things, and you end up with people like Elon Musk selling flamethrowers and just weird shit happening in the world because the free market's awesome. We have Google Glass supposed to be a thing in the near future, a complete phone in your glasses. That would be awesome. There's all of these crazy things that the industries where government has kind of stayed out of for the most part are doing amazing things. TikTok is a great example. They figured out how to fix the copyright issues that YouTube has and Instagram has. People want to make cool videos, but to dances to popular songs, but that's technically illegal. If you want to make any kind of money off of it, if you want any sort of ad revenue, you can't put other people's copyrighted stuff in there. So TikTok said, hey, well, we'll buy the rights to all of these things and then give people what they can use legally, and just solved that whole problem through one app. And, now other people are starting to do similar things, and Instagram and Facebook have kind of hopped on board with that and started doing similar stuff. And that's awesome. That's a huge problem that I didn't know how to solve. I've been not active on YouTube myself, but had a lot of friends that have been active on YouTube my whole life. And, that's just a huge glaring issue with them. Like, how do you make an intro for your podcast that doesn't violate copyrights? How can I make sure how can I show people clips of the news without, getting my video taken down? And free market solves problems, and government ignores them or finds ways around them instead.
I think in a lot of ways it's more that it's hard for the government. It's hard for take this back. It's hard for anybody to look at a situation and think, okay, what are the million things that could happen in the future from here? Where I've invented this really cool little device that lets me make phone calls and I can take notes on it. Let's go ahead and extrapolate from that to Among Us and other network games, right? PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, whatever. It's virtually impossible. It doesn't matter how many smart people you bring together to think about these things. You are going to be outwitted by the 6 billion, 7 billion people who are out there thinking about these things on their own. You simply cannot scale government of any sort to be as effective and as distributed as the real world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen. So they, instead of dealing with what could happen, they deal with what has happened,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of causing change, they're always dealing with change. Okay, hey, how are we now that somebody can take notes on this on their little device here? How are we going to regulate that? How are we going to keep that from being a disruption? And instead of seeing disruption as being something amazing, holy cow, you've got a smartphone, you've got a computer in your pocket that can we cram some wireless into here? What's wireless? I don't know, but it sounds awesome. Instead of instead of doing that, you're looking at it going, wow, how are we supposed to deal with this now?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no, please don't deal with it. Because what happens is you end up with, hey, you know what? We've got cell phones now. We need the Cell Phone Act of 1976, and it'll specify what a cell phone can look like and the capabilities it can have. And we would all be carrying around these things that look like the radio telephones from World War II and from the MASH television show, and we'd be grateful for it because the government's made these possible. You couldn't have. That's
Right.
a different timeline. We've got cell phones, we've got smartphones. Thank you, Steve Jobs. Thank you, all the folks that put time and effort into that. And it wasn't the government that did it. It was
Right.
people thinking outside the box and causing disruptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to stay on analogies that have already been, or examples that have already been brought up, Sears was never going to become Amazon. YouTube was never going to become TikTok. These companies, the disruption and the innovation has always come at a cost to the existing elite of that industry. People that worked at Sears lost their jobs and are, in hardship now because that happened. It wasn't an entirely good thing for everybody. It caused hardship.
Yeah.
So when you have a monopoly, everyone is just naturally in a self-preservation mindset. That's just human. So you can't get this innovation and change and disruption from the existing people. It's never going to happen at the scale that it could happen in a free market. You have to be able to have outside people come in and ruin people's lives for the sake of a better world. The CEOs of Sears, they had to get their lives ruined for us to get great stuff. And now other companies caught up and didn't get screwed over as much as Sears did. And Walmart and Target and some other retailers are getting really good at competing with Amazon and distributing their stuff just as quickly and just as safely and efficiently. And that's awesome. Sears was too far behind the wagon, and they are not going to come back. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. But
now it's one of the stories that I heard a while back. I worked in the technology industry, but one of the things that I came across a while back was that IBM actually had some successful tests and some successful experimental technology for producing flat screen monitors far back, like in the 70s, and that actually got scuttled because it would have cannibalized their CRT monitor production. So I mean, seriously, and I've worked at companies before where I've heard the exact same thing. Hey, we can't sell this product because our cash cow is this thing. So this bit of innovation gets sidelined. Like you said, when you've got a vested interest in making sure that the status quo stays the status quo, innovation gets stifled, choice gets eliminated, and when you get right down to it, that is government in a nutshell. Hey, we want to maintain the status quo, and in some ways that's good. I tend to be a minarchist. I think that having for example, a uniform definition of what murder is is probably a good thing, right? Yeah, it's a good thing. Being conservative in terms of law, being conservative in terms of things like defense, um, all of that I think is a really good idea. Really good idea. Hey, let's be very conservative there. Let's change slowly, because when you change quickly regarding things like war and crime and punishment, um, that's not generally a good idea. You want things in those areas to go as slowly as possible and still make progress, if need be. But yeah, in other areas, no. Speed is life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to innovate, you want to disrupt, you want to invent, you want people doing things like shooting cars into space and building worldwide distribution networks that will get you the deodorant that you need for tomorrow's business meeting on your doorstep at 8 a.m. Just government isn't going to do that.
Right.
Entrenched businesses aren't going to do that. Where that comes from is maximizing freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, because I think there is definitely a need for conservatism in society. I think Jordan Peterson talks about the need for the right and the left to both exist as sort of a yin and yang thing, the best. So, Amazon would not have been what it is without Sears. If they didn't have some kind of a trial to overcome and an existing corporation that's going to try to put them down. And I like to talk about politics in relation to science. The scientific method is challenge everything until you get proven wrong, and then fight for that.
Right.
And I think in politics there's a necessity for people like that who are going to, what do you mean UBI? What do you mean Medicare for all? What do you mean bring get rid of the FDA? Even like what do you mean decriminalize all drugs? Like, no, you need people arguing against those things to make sure that our arguments are refined. Alan Watts quote that I love and I live by now. He said, unless we argue, I don't know what I believe. So when we argue, I say thank you.
Yeah.
And
there's go ahead.
I think that's extremely important to understand if you're going to partake in politics at all. That you need to have that other side to make sure that your beliefs are founded in the best ideas possible.
Yep. And there's actually a young lady I follow on Twitter. Hey, Ollie. She brought up a couple of months ago, I think, mentioned something that I'd never heard of before, Chesterton's fence, which was interesting. I went looking for it, and G.K. Chesterton said, if you come across a fence, in the middle of the road and it's blocking your progress, you may look at that and go, this is stupid. Why is this fence here? Right? And you may want to remove it. But the problem is, you don't know why that fence is there in the first place. You don't know what caused it to be put there. You don't know why it is there. And it may be that on examination that you dig down into it and you realize that, yes, it is really stupid that fence is there. But you may also dig into it and come to realize, hey, I did not understand that there is a reason that this was put here. And I think a lot of cases, what we have when we deal with government in this day and age, unfortunately, is we have a lot of fences everywhere. We don't understand which ones were put there for good reasons, and which ones were put there because it seemed like a good idea at the time, and which ones were put there because the Department of Fence Putting needed to put down 20 fences this month, right?
Right.
So it's hard. It's hard.
Fence putting.
It's hard if you knock down 20 fences, right, and nothing bad happens. You figure, oh, I can knock down this fence, and you let the bull out of the field, and he's running havoc through the town, right? There's so much to examine and so much to worry about. then it becomes hard to look at things. And someone will say, well, what about this fence? What do you think about this fence? Well, I think maybe we could possibly remove that. Oh, you didn't know about this? Okay, yeah, I didn't. But we need to be able to examine things, and we need to be able to challenge ourselves, like you said, and challenge things and say, okay, why is this fence here? Why is this law here?
Mhm.
Why do we do things this way? Is it do we have a good reason for it? Sometimes we do. But a lot of times, what we have is preference. A lot of times, what we have is kind of a cultural norm that this embodies and encodes, and we can understand it. Once we start arguing for or against something, we can reach to the point where we say, you know what, I understand this a lot better now. I understand the issues involved here a lot better, and I can explain to you exactly why this fence should be removed. Or I can explain to you why it's important to leave that fence there, or in some cases, why we need to get rid of that fence and put in a speed bump. Right? It's
Right.
it's a matter of like you said, refining your argument, of understanding where you're coming from, and getting a handle on what you're really working towards.
Right. Yeah, I've seen way too many people that I would consider left libertarians get turned off to the LP by ANCAPs because of their inability to answer questions about environmental regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we do about pollution if not government? And a lot of ANCAPs, not to put them down necessarily, a lot of them don't give a shit about the environment. And so that's not something that they've refined their argument on. But they just flip into this, oh, you're a statist minds argument because it's, morons on Twitter. And now these people are turned off permanently to the libertarian message because they think none of us care about the environment.
Yeah.
Maybe some of those fences can be left up. I usually call myself a classical liberal, but I think that the definition of that and a mini anarchist are pretty similar.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah, I think mini anarchist is slightly more right, but they're both pretty close to the middle line. I think that some government is okay. Maybe a social safety net for people when they fall in hard times can be okay, to ensure the prosperity of everybody. And, we can afford a little bit in taxes here and there. Maybe we tax specific things that we as a society can agree that we don't like, in a small enough way that we don't encourage a black market. And so, maybe we leave the cigarette tax alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in New York City, I'm kidding, because we're not going to leave that one alone, because $16 for a pack of cigarettes is ridiculous. But if you live in the rest of the
Yeah.
country, or outside of like California, New York City, cigarettes being $7 or $8, and three of those dollars go into the state government to fund schools. Like, okay, all right, sure, maybe we leave stuff like that alone for the sake of the world and the country and society as a whole. But maybe we leave some EPA regulations alone for a little while until we can really figure out a good solution.
Yeah.
Figure out a better speed bump, because at the moment I don't know good speed bump solutions for EPA regulations. I don't know how to solve those problems outside the government. So I'm not going to campaign on getting rid of the EPA. I know how to replace the FDA, so I'll talk about that.
And you know what? I think that actually is really good, and that's one of the things that does set libertarians apart from Democrats and Republicans. Democrats and Republicans always have an answer. Libertarians are one of the few groups of people, honestly, that I've encountered where you can talk to someone and have them say, "I don't know." How do you solve the problem of dealing with environmental impact? When you're okay, yeah, there's some thought along the lines of dealing with, okay, if you've got a factory and you're dumping pollution into a river, it harms certain people, and you can prove that, and you can come back and get restitution in your private courts and so on and so forth. Okay, fantastic. It doesn't matter what situation you come up with. Yeah, a great one is, let's say there's a company that decided 100 years ago that they're going to mine certain types of ore, and they're going to deal with it, and then they're going to dump it into the river. And it isn't until 50 years later that they realize that, after the company's gone bankrupt and there's nobody left around to be responsible for it, that all that ore was horribly radioactive, and now people are being impacted. Right? How do you deal with a situation like that? I don't know. What do you do in that sort of situation? I think it's perfectly acceptable to say, you know what, I don't know. I am not sure what the answer is, but I can tell you that it probably isn't government. It's not going to be creating a bureaucracy to deal with these situations. It's going to be, for example, I think this is kind of talking off the cuff, but the idea that, you're going to establish an entire bureaucracy to deal with these sorts of environmental issues is probably not going to work nearly as efficiently as saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, as a government, we're going to say, yes, there's a crime that's been committed. We're going to appoint a special prosecutor, and we're going to let the courts work this out. Is it still the government working? Yes, but it's the government working in a way that everybody understands, and it's not taking something and putting it into a special box, or saying that we need to grow the government, we need to expand the government to do this. It's saying, yeah, there's a situation here. There's a crime that's been committed, or we suspect there is. We know how to solve this. Let's do it the way that we do it, and not create a 10,000 person bureaucracy because of this one issue.
Right.
No, and you can look at that and say, but maybe that's not the right answer. But it is a way that we could look at it, at solving it, without expanding the government. We still may have government involvement. We still may have some sort of whether federal or state or local involvement in terms of judicial system, but we're at least not growing the government in those cases. So we can start talking about how best we might approach that problem, even if we don't know what the answer is.
Right. We need to approach government, I think, in a similar way as some of the founding fathers, especially like the Democratic Republican variety, of like, it's a necessary evil. So if we've done our digging and our thinking, and we've come to the conclusion that the best way to solve this problem is in fact government, it is the best solution for everybody. When we get to that point, because like the what you were talking about, if there isn't anybody to really sue, but people are dying, and they don't have the money to pay for the new medical bills, and somehow the government has to step in and save some people's lives. We figured that out. We have to understand the human truths that everyone is self-preservating. So we need to create it in a way where they're not given the opportunity to fall into that mindset of self-preservation. And okay, we fixed the problem. Now what? Now this 100-person State Department that we just created is all out of a job. They're never going to do that.
Yeah.
So they're never going to actually solve the problem. And it's just going to get bigger. Or maybe they solve the problem and then they find other problems. They will find a way to keep their job. Everyone will. That's just human nature. So we need to make sure that we're creating government solutions that have hard expiration dates, or they are maybe you create a solution that is long term, that can be in a self-preservation mode, that has a larger agenda than that one thing that made it an existence. So, you know, you give them more jobs from the get-go. Like, okay, you can solve this problem fully and completely because we have another job for you to do when you're done. You know, we need to be in that mindset of like, if it is a necessary evil that will get out of control, if we don't contain it. So, you know, let's think about it that way, and let's think about how we can make sure that it doesn't shoot off into something crazy in the distant future.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. You mentioned necessary evil, and you'll get pushback from people. You know this, right? Oh no, it's not necessary. Government's not necessary at all. You can, you know, anarchy, self-organization, blah 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 blah. Which, you know what? I would be happy if you could prove me wrong. I really would be happy.
Right. Same here.
But I think what you actually have is maybe not. This may sound weird. Maybe not necessary evil, but a tolerable evil, right? Or more to the point, tolerable inefficiency. Mm-hmm. There are some things where, you know, when I go out, you know, and I'm going to Amazon, I'm looking for something that meets my requirements, and I don't necessarily pick the cheapest thing. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily pick the most expensive thing. Sometimes, depending on where I'm at, I'm like, okay, I just need, I'm looking for something for one use. It doesn't have to be the best. I can tolerate some level of crappiness, right? Or I can deal with, if this is something that I'm going to be using over and over and over and over again, I want the absolute best tool I can get. Mm-hmm. I think in some cases, government is just, you know what, we could do better, but it would require a lot more effort. So we're willing to put up with this somewhat crappy solution,
right?
just because it's generally a little bit easier for everybody. There are times when you're on the road and you could find a 5-star restaurant that, you know what, swinging through McDonald's or Wendy's is really just okay, I can live with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of times, you know, when you talk about small government, you reach the point where you're like, yeah, we could make this better, but we can live with this.
Yeah.
Then
the important part of libertarianism, you know, there's all the different labels that you can have, you know, an anarchist or an ANCAP or classical liberal, but I think the one that everyone should kind of identify with is voluntarist, because, you know, if what you eventually want is something voluntary, where you get to decide if it's a tolerable evil or if it's not. Mm-hmm. It's like a great example of that for me personally. I have only ever shopped on Amazon once, and it was because I had a gift card. Other than that, I have never purchased anything from Amazon. I don't like online shopping for most of my things. If I do buy something online, it's most likely directly from a retailer like Walmart or like a clothing store or something like that. And very, very rarely do I buy something online. I like shopping. I like the action of shopping, and I like getting to go do something. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people and getting to talk to a sales associate, getting to go through a checkout, and, you know, stuff like that is part of why I enjoy buying things, more than the actual like getting of the thing. Most of the time, it's to an extreme level that's weird to some people, and I get that. But you know, so I don't see Amazon as a tolerable evil. My sister, however, shops on Amazon all the time. They have Amazon Prime, and they watch their shows on that, and they get all their stuff with the free 2-day shipping, and they love Amazon. She sees it as a tolerable evil. She understands. She's really big on like workers' rights issues, and she understands how bad Amazon really is on that kind of stuff, and they're terrible to their employees. So she sees it as a tolerable evil. I don't. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if we can get government to that kind of a level where, you know, maybe they're doing a bunch of shitty stuff, but they're doing it really well, and people are kind of okay with it, and some people aren't. And, you know, you have the opportunity to work at a warehouse that isn't Amazon. You can go shop somewhere that isn't Amazon, you don't have to be a part of that system if you don't want to, no matter where you fall on that spectrum. Like working for them or patronizing them. You always have another option.
And when you talk about like we did earlier, talk about pushing things down as far as you can to the local level.
Mm-hmm.
Even beyond the 50 states, you've got what 3,000 plus different counties in the United States, right? If you don't like the way that Allegheny County does something, you can move up to Butler, you can move to another state, you can bounce around. There's so many different permutations that I realize that in some cases you've got issues of family and preference in terms of where you can work or what's available. And I'm an embedded systems programmer. I may not be able to find something in southern Louisiana that that suits my skill set, but I can find something, believe it, out in Des Moines or whatever. So there are limitations there, but those are all self-imposed. Those are my decisions. I want to stay close to my family. I want to work in this field. I want to continue, living in some place that's warm or some place where it's easy for me to go hiking or skiing or whatever. So in a lot of cases, I'm making decisions and I'm making trade-offs. If I've got 3,000 different places I could live, I could start eliminating them and get down to I could live here or I could live there or I could do this and then maybe I start worrying about things like, hey, what's the government like? They're a commonwealth, they're a township, they're a self-organizing narco-synclastic commune. However it works out, right? But now it just becomes another part of the decision-making process for me. Instead of being, hey, it doesn't matter where I'm going. The only restaurant I have is McDonald's, and the only place I can shop is Amazon.
Right. And the other beautiful part about it is that the further down you get and the further localized you get, you basically eliminate most of those concerns that you brought up. Because, for you, moving to Butler County, you could still probably work in Allegheny County. You could still go see your family in Allegheny County. You could still go to your church in Allegheny County. You're still able to maintain most of those things, and you only had to move 20 miles away and were able to fulfill all of those other things that you wanted of an Ancapistan that you want to live in. If you can get it localized enough, you can take away most of those concerns as well.
Yeah, and that's actually that was one of the things that I really appreciated. Kind of circling back to the presidential campaigns, Adam Kokesh really, I did not agree with him on the whole dissolution of the government thing. I thought that was like just a little bit too far for me.
Yeah.
But some of his messaging in terms of localization I thought was absolutely spot on. Mm-hmm. Like we talked about with roads, we talked about with different government programs. When you get things down to the local level, when you get people to understand that that's where things really happen in their lives and where things really matter, I think you start seeing a big change in people's perceptions about government, about the role of government, and about how much they really want someone, 300, 400, 500,000 miles away, making decisions about how they should live their life. Right. It's a lot easier to go down to see, down to the coffee shop and sit down with Mayor Tom and explain to him how you don't like the idea that they're kicking around in city council right now than it is to, get some time with Senator so-and-so and explain to him why you're not a fan of his legislation, and he should listen to you even though you're not actually one of his constituents. So localization, I think, is really a big issue that we should be pushing in LP.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Anybody that watches my YouTube channel and has watched since its inception. You can kind of see a transition of how I feel about Adam Kokesh over the last year and a half, because when I very first started this was during my city council run, and I kind of just heard about him and heard his message, and I saw him as an extremist anarchist that was scaring off potential allies, and
Mhm.
I actually kind of rallied against him and his followers and his mindset and the word anarchist for quite some time within the LP. But as I watched his presidential run and kind of how he acted afterwards, he's changed a lot of his messaging. When I had him on the show, he actually was calling out people for using the word anarchy because, that's still coercion. If you're forcing people to get rid of government, that's just as coercive as forcing people to live under a government. And so he's changed some of his messaging, and I've gotten to understand his original points significantly better. And now I'm a big fan. I went from being somebody who actively talked shit about him and that he was part of the problem with the LP to, now I'll say he's got the most effective plan of anarchy I've ever seen. And, he's the only one with a plan.
You mentioned Peterson talking about conservatives and liberals being a yin and a yang, right? In the within the Libertarian Party, I think that same sort of balance there is the pragmatists and the radicals.
Mhm.
Adam is absolutely radical. I think I try and straddle the line between radical and pragmatist. I think there's other people that are much more incrementalist. I'll say I'm a realistic radical. There's not much you can do, or maybe I'm a radical pragmatist. I don't know. We want to do things faster than you would think, but it's the same sort of balance. You really want people pushing. You want someone like Adam pushing for, hey, let's go as hard and as fast and localization is the message. Let's push it as far as we can, as quickly as we can. And you need people who saying, what, hold on, let's put on the brakes here, because that's going to cause disruptions that ultimately are going to cause problems down the road. We need to, we can't just floor this and take off at 90 miles over the prairie. We're going to break an axle. So there's a good balance there, I think. And you really do need both. You need the visionaries, you need the radicals, you need the pragmatists, the guys that are worried about dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and you need people who are able to and willing to look at both and say, you know what, you're right and you're right, and you both have some good points, but let's try and blend them so that we all. Yeah, one of the things that I've seen said and that I firmly believe is a good example, a good way to understand when you've achieved workable compromises when everybody is at least a little bit unhappy. So if we all manage to get ourselves to the point where we're a little bit unhappy, but we're still moving in the same direction, I think ultimately that'll be a big win for everybody.
Yeah, because you can't please everyone. I think in that kind of dichotomy, I like to refer to myself as like an optimistic pragmatist. So like, I am a member of the Pragmatic Caucus. I do tend to ally with that group of the party specifically, but I'll admit that I did not pay very much attention to the Libertarian primary in the kind of middle section. I was working for Tulsi, and I was kind of like, meh, they can pick whoever they want. I'm just gonna. I just kind of tuned it out for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But the last, or I watched most of the last two debates that you guys did, or that happened. But the last one that I really paid attention to was the New York State one that was in like Olean.
Okay. Yeah.
That, and I was really pleased with the presence of this kind of dichotomy that you're talking about. You had the Adam Kokesh and the Dan Berman that were kind of, more on the radical side of some issues. You had like Vermin Supreme, who I think he doesn't straddle the line, he jumps very drastically over it. Which is kind of how I feel about the like left-right divide for myself. He's super one way, super the other way, but in a way that kind of makes him kind of a centrist in that fight. And then you had people like yourself who were actually more in the middle there, and then more people towards the pragmatic side, like Jedi or Joe, or there were people that were let's just calm down a minute and like let's figure this out for a second. And I watched that debate, and watched some. There were parts of it where I was just like, "Oh my god, this is happening!" Dan Chrisman jumping off the stage to retrieve whatever it was he had thrown off the stage. I was like, "Oh my god, what is this?" But I was very, very happy watching that debate, listening to especially that debate is where I started to pay attention to you. Because I was like, I'd never heard of you until that debate, and I was like, this guy gets it. This guy's messaging is on point. I like this. This is like common sense libertarianism. I saw Joe as kind of a little stale, and I didn't like the energy behind like Dan Berman and Adam Kokesh or Hornberger, and that kind of like fiery anti-statist like hardcore fight. I was like, I liked where you were in that. And then unfortunately I moved to New Hampshire like 2 weeks after that debate happened and kind of just like stopped paying attention from there on out. I got to meet Vermin and Lincoln Chafee while I was in New Hampshire. I paid a little bit of attention to it here and there. Tried to stick up for really the only part that I played in that was sticking up for people when I knew that they were being lied about. That I didn't fight for, this person's better because blank. And I didn't really have an opinion. But if somebody called Joe a socialist or was saying something negative about a candidate that I just knew wasn't true, they were bringing up some just random BS from like Adam's past, and I'm just like, okay, this isn't the conversation. Let's stay on point. All we're doing by dragging people through the mud is ruining our partnerships. We need to be able to come out of this primary as a united front and push whoever wins towards victory, and dragging people through the mud is not going to get us there. So I tried to do my best to partake in those conversations on social media, but other than that, I try to just tune it out because there's too much stuff going on.
No, I understand. It was a wild ride for me. Olean was actually the first debate I was in. So I mean, the reason you hadn't heard of me before that was because nobody had heard of me before that. So I'm glad that my message hit you that way, because that's exactly what I was searching for. That's what I was going for. I think there's a call for that. You've got definitely have people that out there that are searching for a political home that will respond more to Vermin. You've got people out there who will click with Dan. There are people who will find Joe to be just right on point, and some people that will connect with me. And I think all of us have or had a really good opportunity to reach out to people both within and without the party, to connect with them and to do what we can to bring people into the party, and like you said about your own personal growth. The people that come into the party, I'm not the same person, politically speaking, as I was 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Oh yeah.
I've grown significantly. Getting anybody in, plugged in and involved is going to cause them to, like you said, argue their points, refine what they believe, determine where their weak spots are, and work to either correct those or at least admit that they're there. But we are overall, as a party, we're going to be stronger. The more people we have, reaching out to others, connecting with them, bringing them in, helping them understand what liberty means, and helping them to look at things through that lens of liberty. What's important is that I'm able to make the choices that I need to make for my life. You make the choices you need to make for your life, and that we agree that sometimes, even though we may not agree on whether those choices are good for you, or you may not think that my choices are good for me. Those are our choices that we're making, and that we're responsible for living with them.
Right.
So yeah, that sort of growth, I don't think it matters whether you're coming in, through Vermin, or through, from Tulsi, or from Bernie, or from Ron Paul. When you start internalizing that and start thinking in terms of liberty, you know, basically the party grows and everybody wins.
Yeah. When I look back at the political beliefs that I had when I registered as a libertarian, I was like, compared to what I believe right now, I was barely a libertarian. I had a love for guns and drugs and a general distrust of the government. That was about all I had at that point in time. My dad raised me to, respect the government, but interact with it as little as I possibly could. So,
Yeah.
I had a general foundation of, government isn't all perfect. And I didn't smoke yet, but I understood that weed should be legal. Like, this is just dumb. I researched it. I was like, okay, it does things to your brain that I don't want to do. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to mess with that. But it being illegal is just stupid. And so there was only one party that agreed with both my stances on guns and my stances on drugs. And so I became a libertarian. and in the last 4.5 years, I have learned that the government messes up a whole lot of other stuff too. And I've slowly gone down on the political spectrum over years, and down and left, honestly. I've crossed over the line, just barely. But I think, to circle back to a main chunk of our conversation, the Libertarian Party is a political party that is trying to be part of the government, which is, as we defined it earlier, a necessary evil that only works if you localize it and give people a home and don't try to force your beliefs on other people. So the Libertarian Party can only work well if it's super localized and has a lot of buckets for people to be able to fall into and feel at home and feel like they're accomplishing something. If we're trying to, I've seen so much on Twitter the last week and a half, words like "take over the LP." I see it in my group chats. I see it, from my friends and my enemies. I've seen it from the Mises Caucus, but I've also seen it from Tulsi people that have just joined, and we want to come in and spread this message of unity and bottom unity, and we need to take over the LP with this message and take it over from these right-wing bigots, which, I'm part of that mission, that I do understand that, but that whole mentality around that is so anti-liberty. And we need to take the same stance we take towards the federal government as we do towards the LNC, and see these people as leaders that are there because we need some sort of unified messaging and some sort of unified force. We need something that can run presidential elections, and we need some way to decide who those candidates are. So the LNC is a necessary evil within our party that needs to be maintained and controlled and localized to the best of our ability. And when we start to get into that kind of a mindset, and of the mindset of you have your caucus, I have my caucus. It's the same as you have your party, I have my party. It's you have your state, I have my state. We need to be able to have that same mentality within the any group trying to take it over and force their pragmatic views on other people, or their Mises Caucus ANCAP stuff the entire party is going to fail miserably in the same way that every government organization fails miserably.
Yeah, but top down generally just doesn't work. It can, and I used the military as an example previously, especially if you're talking about an all voluntary military, right? You've got a bunch of people who agree, I'm going to come in under these rules. I'm going to act this way. I'm voluntarily putting myself in this organization where I have to understand that everything's top down. That works in that situation. Trying to force that on people who don't want it, generally, there's a reason why Americans, I believe it was one of the governors reporting back to the king when he first got here, back before the Revolutionary War, reported that the Americans were unruly people. We do not like to be ruled. We really don't. And that's part of our heritage. That's part of where we come from. We don't like people telling us what to do. So when whether it's in a party, whether it's in the government, whether it's your homeowners association, whether it's some guy at the parking lot, and when you're going shopping, you really don't like people bossing you around. So the way you avoid that is by building coalitions from the ground up, by getting a bunch of people on the same page, agreeing that certain things are important, and working towards those goals. When you're talking about the Libertarian Party, liberty. That's it. That's the core principle. We've got a platform. We've got a bunch of other governing documents, but everything comes back to the idea: are we working to increase liberty? If we're not, there's something wrong. If we are, then it doesn't matter necessarily what you believe or what somebody else believes, or how somebody in California is running their campaign versus how somebody in Texas is running theirs. We're all focused on liberty. We're all pulling in that same direction. We know we've got a long haul ahead of us. There's a long way to go before we get close. And that's one of the things that always bugs me is anarchists arguing with minarchists, arguing with voluntarists, arguing with we aren't even on the same side. We've got a 5,000-mile journey before we get close enough that we can argue about whether we're going to stop here, or here. Right? We have so much work to do and so much ground to cover just to get to the point where that argument even makes sense. Let's just keep pulling towards liberty, and we'll get, God willing, the creeks don't rise. We'll get close enough that we can start arguing about whether we should have limited government, no government, or something in between that.
Right. I could not have said it better myself. So are we going to see another Robb campaign in the near future? Are you looking at something more local, or a 24 run or something like that?
Possibly not in the next few years. I stepped up. I've been appointed as the Western Vice Chair. David Vesely, who was the Western Vice Chair in Pennsylvania, stepped down for personal reasons. And he's done a fantastic job. I'm still learning a lot from him and from other people in the LPPA. But I'm going to be focused on that for at least a little while, possibly for a couple of years if they'll still have me. But I've got a couple of girls that are in high school and going to be graduating in the next couple of years. So what I'm looking at is kind of being behind the scenes and helping to grow the party in Pennsylvania as best I can. Get libertarians elected, get people plugged in and active in the party, and do everything I can along those lines. And then we'll see what happens in 2024, Larry Sharp always said that you think about you run this election, but you think about the next one. You think about the next campaign, which was great advice. I really appreciated that, and yeah, I'm thinking about what comes next, but that's still a ways in the future, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's an important mindset, especially in the world of libertarians, where when you're running for a big seat, most likely you're looking at a loss at your first run. So you have to be how can this affect my next campaign positively?
Right.
Because if all you're caring about is this one, it's very easy to be like, I'm not going to be president of the United States, so why care? Why put in why put in the same level of energy that I could be putting in, if I believed that I was going to win? Well, maybe this is a stepping stone to a county commissioner job
Right.
in 22, and everything that you do, every door that you knock on is going to be beneficial for that. And there's going to be donors that are going to come back and help you through that.
Yep.
And that might be a win. So
absolutely,
it's definitely important just to look at the next mission. And like you said, as long as we're moving in the right direction, we can decide where we stop on that train when we get into the right nation, at least.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, since you brought it up, you mentioned you had your run. Was it last year or the year before? So what do you got coming up? What do you got coming up?
At the moment, I'll give almost a similar answer as you did. I am not in a position of power within my state LP at the moment. I actually just lost an election to none of the above back in September, which was a fun time. Thank you, BC's caucus,
been there,
starting rumors. They started a rumor that I was a Democratic Party infiltrator because I was a registered Democrat for petitioning reasons for Tulsi. And so they were able to convince exactly half of the New York State Libertarian Party that I was some kind of an evil leftist infiltrator to keep me off of the state committee. But I do have a lot of great relationships with candidates in the area, and I will be hopefully working very closely with Stacey Pressman's mayoral run in New York City, as well as hopefully in 22, Larry Sharp's run again for governor. And then we'll see from there what stirs up and where I want to settle down, because that's really the problem for me right now when it comes to picking an office to run for. So I don't know where I want to live. I've done so much traveling this year, and previous years as well, where I spent a solid 2.5 months in Colorado over the last 2 months looking at places to live, because I was planning on moving out to there. And that might be a little bit further down the road than I thought it was while I was out there, but it's still a significant possibility. Michigan was awesome. New York City's great. Upstate New York is awesome. I could see a future in a lot of different places, so I don't want to be a fake kind of candidate that just like moves in and then runs and then moves somewhere else and then runs and just keeps running for offices that I'm displaying with my actions that I truly didn't care about.
Right.
So better to bounce around and help other people that are rooted in their communities, and then figure out where I want to lay down roots when I'm a little bit older.
Yeah. And that's something I'm going to say for anybody watching. If you're still watching at this point, God bless you. But listening to us ramble. But one of the things that I really enjoyed in my own campaign was obviously running my own campaign, but also helping out with Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen and their campaign. It's a lot of fun. It really is. And it's a way to get involved and to be part of something that's going on without having to be that person out front and answering questions and having to be on the spot all the time. Sitting back and working on communications, or working on fundraising, or working on messaging, working on media. are all really amazing ways that you can get involved in a campaign, support the party, support your candidates, and make a real impact in your local area. Really without the commitment that comes with, hey, I'm going to step up and I'm going to run, and it really it establishes you and gets you a name within the party. Gets you to the point where you're one of the people that people understand. Maybe you're not the one who gets up and speaks and runs for office and presents ideas, but you're one of the guys that helps make that happen. And really being in that position is an awful lot of fun. It really is. Being on Joe's campaign was one of the, and helping to organize events was some of the best time that I think I've had in a long time.
Oh yeah, I definitely, I did the opposite of what most people would do, of like climbing a corporate ladder. I started off as a candidate and then took 2 giant jumps down the totem pole throughout the year, and they were both so refreshing and so relaxing and a huge load off, because I went from running for office a week after my campaign. I was in New Hampshire working for Tulsi, and that was just a huge jump down, a huge load off, especially when I got there. I was just a volunteer that was out knocking doors. I was a nobody when I moved to New Hampshire. I ended up a deputy volunteer coordinator by the end of it, and so everything I was doing was 1,000-mile high view, and managing hundreds of people across the country. And then after that, I started working with Yao, and I went back to just being a door knocker. And I was, oh my gosh, I wasn't even running the team that was there. I was just a door knocker. I was the very bottom of the totem pole. I was brand new to the organization. Nobody knew me. I was just there to knock doors. And eventually I did actually become sort of a managerial position, but nothing in an official capacity where I actually had any real responsibility. And it was great, to just be able to interact with the candidate and the people that were above me, and the voters in such a refreshing, like, relaxed manner of just, this job. My job is just to convince voters to choose liberty over not liberty. And that is an awesome experience, just to get to talk to hundreds of people a day and just be like, hey, what do you care about? How can my message apply to you? What do you see in your daily life as issues that my candidate might be able to solve? I've never found a job that I enjoy nearly as much as just grunt political work. But then getting to honestly, like, I've done a lot of grunt work in a lot of different industries. I've sold most of the things you could possibly sell in, like, retail and commission sales jobs and telemarketing and street sales. And I've done a bunch of grunt work, and nothing has been nearly as satisfying as politics. It's so much fun.
And you know what, I absolutely can see that too. It really is. There's a difference between being a candidate. And I saw this too. I was a candidate, and I was worried that, am I connecting with people? Am I reaching people? How are things going here? I don't know. Really, is it going the way that I want it to do? And I went from that to, okay, I need to work within a state. Here's some volunteers, and all of a sudden I know, oh wow, here's how I'm making progress. I've talked to this guy, I've talked to that guy, we've got this going on now. This county's on board, and these other guys over here, I just, we're working on getting them signs, and we're working on getting these guys literature. And all of a sudden, it went from this nebulous, is everything working out, to I can start checking off. I knocked on these doors. I made this happen. I had this go on, and it was just a great feeling. It really was.
Oh yeah, I think the most important thing in life is to have a purpose. And, you don't need to go into politics to fulfill that piece of your life. There's many things that you can do, but if you don't feel like you're fulfilling some life purpose in your day-to-day life, you're not going to be living a fulfilled life. You're not going to be a happy person. It's not going to, you're not going to be your best self. And so, I've found that for me, my biggest passion is politics. I love it. I like talking about it. I like being engaged in it. I think I'm good at it. It checks off all of those, what you need in a good career boxes. So I've chosen to continue that. But, I do think that politics is rewarding for a lot of people, in a way that sales and marketing and retail is just not for the majority of the world. And I highly encourage people to, if they have the ability to work in politics, just do it for a campaign cycle. Pick a candidate in your local area and say, I'm going to dedicate my free time for the next 6 months to helping you win, or get as close to winning as you possibly can. And then I'll go from there. You don't have to quit your job and run for office like I did. Just do a little something, get a taste of it, and see if it's what you love. And if you love it, then do it. Just do it, because you can do it. And there is a way to make a living in politics, without sacrificing your ideals. And, if you really care about it, you're good at it, and you love it, the LP will find a way to make it happen.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, before we go, you want to just tell the viewers how they can get in touch with you and get involved with maybe your future campaigns, or also, the LPPA?
Oh, yeah. The LPPA, you can reach me at SamRobb, SAMROBB, at lppa.org. And if you go to lppa.org, obviously is the state website, you can get plugged in there. We have a growing organization across the state. We've got counties that are getting organized in the western part of the state, and central region. Eastern region of Pennsylvania is very, very well developed in terms of libertarian presence. So if you are in any part of Pennsylvania, we can get you hooked up, get you plugged in. Ultimately, our goals over the next year or so are to get libertarians elected. So if you have, like David was saying, if you have any interest at all in being able to help someone locally, with their campaign, or if you're interested in doing something, running for office, and it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be splashy. I came close to being elected judge of elections here in my county without even trying. So I got 5 votes, right? So because people recognize my name. If you have a desire to make your county, make your township, make your city better, you can do it. You can make it happen. It doesn't have to be difficult. Reach out to the LPPA. We'd be happy to get you connected. We'd be happy to show you what you can do to help candidates in your area, or what you can do if you're interested in being a candidate, and how we can help you make that happen.
All right. Yes. Get involved. There is no way to make the LP better unless you get involved and make it better yourself. Candidates
100%.
succeed unless people help them succeed. Leadership isn't going to change unless we find people to replace it. It gets better the more involved you get. Even though sometimes the more involved you get, it seems more hopeless. But I stay involved, stay fighting, because this is important. This is life or death for a lot of people in reality.
It's worth it. Yeah, it's absolutely worth it.
It's definitely worth it. And if you're not in Pennsylvania and you want to get involved, most of the websites are fairly similar. lpacronym.org. So lpny.org would be if you're in New York. If you can't find them, fightforliberty.com/join, and I will get you hooked up with whatever local organizations you need. And definitely like and subscribe. Sam, thank you so much for coming on and talking. This has been absolutely great.
Thank you for having me, David. It's been a fantastic evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for watching, guys. And until next time, keep up the fight.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons below. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fight for Liberty, and support the channel at patreon.com/fightforliberty. And as always, keep up the fight.